Katowice, Poland. Stage 1 of the 2020 Tour de Pologne. Fabio Jakobsen hits a sprint barrier at over 80 km per hour. 5 hours of surgery. An induced coma. He is not the only cyclist who almost died during a race. Chris Froome shattered his femur, ribs and vertebrae on a reconnaissance descent at the 2019 Dauphiné. Remco Evenepoel plunged off a bridge into a ravine at Lombardia. These are not freak accidents. They are the product of a system where speed, terrain and financial incentive push elite athletes to the edge of what is survivable. And what determines who lives and who does not may not be what you think. On August the 5th, 2020, the closing meters of Stage 1 at the Tour de Pologne in Katowice delivered a stark reminder of what is at stake. Fabio Jakobsen, racing for Deutsche Quick Step, was locked in a head-to-head sprint with Dylan Groenewegen of Jumbo-Visma. Both riders were pushing close to 80 km per hour, speeds where a single miscalculation can have catastrophic results. As the finish line approached, Groenewegen veered off his line. In the chaos of the lead-out, Jakobsen was squeezed toward the barriers. The collision was immediate and violent. Jakobsen's front wheel clipped the edge, launching him into the metal fencing and directly into a race official. The impact tore apart the barriers and left Jakobsen motionless on the tarmac. Race medics arrived within seconds. The initial assessment was grim: severe head trauma, facial fractures, and heavy blood loss. He was airlifted to Sosnowiec Hospital, where surgeons worked for 5 hours to reconstruct his face and stabilize his airway. Doctors placed him in a medically induced coma. For 2 days, the outcome remained uncertain. On August 7th, hospital director Pavel Gruenpeter announced that Jakobsen was conscious, breathing on his own, and his blood pressure had stabilized. The crash reignited debate over barrier design at sprint finishes. The fencing in Katowice failed under the force of impact, turning metal rails into shrapnel. Riders and teams demanded changes from the UCI, cycling's governing body. The disciplinary jury moved quickly. Groenewegen was disqualified from the race and later received a 9-month suspension. Jakobsen, despite being unconscious at the finish, was declared the stage winner. Jakobsen's recovery was measured in months, not weeks. Multiple surgeries followed to repair his jaw, palate, and teeth. He later said he believed he would die in that moment. By mid-2021, he returned to racing, lining up at the Vuelta a España just over a year after the crash. Team sponsors and management faced questions about risk management at high-speed finishes. Deutsche Quick Step filed a criminal complaint against Groenewegen. Jumbo-Visma benched their sprinter pending legal review. Meanwhile, the UCI began a review of finish line safety, examining not just rider conduct, but also the physical infrastructure of races. The Katowice incident underscored how the pursuit of victory at 80 km per hour leaves no room for error. Barriers, regulations, and team tactics all play a role, but in the final seconds of a sprint, survival can hinge on decisions made in a fraction of a second. For Jakobsen, the difference between life and death was measured in centimeters and milliseconds, a reality every professional cyclist faces each time the peloton charges for the line. Reconnaissance rides are a routine part of professional cycling, intended to reduce risk by letting riders preview the day's most dangerous sections. On June 7, 2019, Chris Froome, then riding for Team Ineos, set out to study the final descent of Stage 4 at the Critérium du Dauphiné. The roads near Roche-la-Molière in the Loire region were slick from rain, winding through forested hills with little margin for error. Froome, preparing for another Tour de France campaign, was alone on the descent, supported by a team car trailing behind. At approximately 62 km per hour, Froome entered a left-hand bend. His front wheel lost traction on a wet patch, sending him into a concrete wall and low barrier. Witnesses reported that he was unconscious for several minutes. The force of the impact resulted in a catalogue of injuries: a broken right femur, multiple rib fractures, 6 or more, 2 fractured vertebrae, a fractured right elbow, and a punctured lung. The severity of the trauma required an immediate airlift by French emergency services. Within 30 minutes, Froome was at Saint-Étienne University Hospital, where trauma teams stabilized his breathing and began emergency surgery to drain blood from his chest and repair his lung. The next 48 hours were critical. Froome underwent orthopedic surgery to stabilize his femur and elbow, both requiring plates and screws. Rib and vertebral fractures were managed through immobilization and respiratory support. The medical team monitored for signs of internal bleeding or neurological damage, but his helmet had prevented any major head injury. By June 12th, he was discharged to begin rehabilitation in Monaco, but the prognosis was clear. A full recovery would take months, not weeks. Team Ineos responded by reviewing their emergency protocols and risk management strategies. Pairing riders for reconnaissance rides became standard, and weather monitoring was tightened. The accident highlighted the limitations of preparation. Froome was one of the most experienced stage racers in the world, supported by a team with an annual budget of €50 million and access to the best equipment and medical staff in the sport. Yet, in a fraction of a second, the combination of wet roads, fatigue, and high speed had overwhelmed every precaution. Rehabilitation was a 9-month process. Initial weeks focused on regaining basic mobility with crutches, followed by stationary bike sessions at half his pre-crash power output. By September, Froome was riding outdoors again, logging short distances around Monaco. In November, he returned to altitude training, gradually building up to 4-hour and 5-hour rides. His first race back came at the Tour of the Emirates in February 2020, marking a full return to competition and a recovery that many had doubted was possible. The incident forced a broader conversation about descent reconnaissance and the unpredictable risks that even the most controlled environments can present. For Froome and Team Ineos, the crash was a reminder that no amount of planning can eliminate the dangers inherent to high-speed cycling, especially when weather and terrain combine to reduce reaction times to less than a second. Remco Evenepoel's crash at Il Lombardia on August 15, 2020, exposed the razor-thin margin between calculated risk and disaster on solo descents. Racing for Deceuninck Quick Step, Evenepoel approached the Ponte del Diavolo bridge outside Bergamo at nearly 75 km/h, alone after a mid-race attack. The descent was notorious among riders, narrow with a steep gradient and a sharp left-hand bend just past the bridge. Recent rain had left the road slick, and loose gravel collected on the inside of the turn. Evenepoel, pushing over 400 watts in pursuit of the leaders, entered the corner at full speed. His front wheel lost grip, and in an instant he vaulted over the low stone barrier. Instead of sliding out onto the tarmac, Evenepoel dropped more than 30 meters into a ravine. The bike separated mid-air, tumbling ahead of him into the rocks and the shallow stream below. Helicopter footage captured the aftermath. The bike twisted among boulders, and Evenepoel lay motionless at the water's edge. The depth of the fall and the jagged terrain left little doubt about the severity of the situation. Italian mountain rescue scrambled to the scene, reaching the rider within minutes. Stabilization was critical. Evenepoel had suffered a fractured pelvis, a broken right humerus, and a contused lung. The medical team used a helicopter winch to extract him from the ravine, then transferred him to Ospedale Papa Giovanni III in Bergamo, a Level 1 trauma center. Within 24 hours, surgeons repaired the pelvic fracture and stabilized his arm. The lung contusion was managed with careful monitoring to avoid complications. He remained in the hospital for 10 days, with the team releasing regular updates on his condition. The crash underscored the limits of reconnaissance and preparation. Evenepoel had studied the descent with his team, but fatigue and changing road conditions erased the advantage. The bridge corner, with its combination of speed, gradient, and minimal barriers, offered no margin for recovery once the bike lost traction. UCI records show that descents with gradients above 10% and limited runoff account for a significant share of severe injuries in World Tour events. In this case, the absence of physical barriers at the ravine's edge proved decisive. Quick-step management responded by tightening their protocols for solo descents and demanding improved safety measures on high-risk sections. The team's medical staff, operating with an annual budget of €30 million, coordinated a phased rehabilitation. Evenepoel's first month focused on regaining the ability to walk and basic mobility. By September, he was back on an indoor trainer, logging short sessions under supervision. Outdoor riding resumed in November at a training camp in Mallorca, with gradual increases in duration and intensity. By March 2021, 8 months after the crash, Evenepoel returned to racing at De Brabantse Pijl. His power output, measured at 420 watts for sustained efforts, matched pre-injury levels. He went on to win at the Tour de Wallonie in July, completing a comeback few thought possible after such a fall. The Lombardia incident highlighted the vulnerability of even the most talented riders when fatigue, weather, and road design converge. For Evenepoel, survival hinged on the speed of the medical response and the strength of his equipment. His helmet absorbed the initial impact, preventing head trauma. The aftermath spurred organizers to add barriers and warning signs at similar corners in subsequent editions. As Evenepoel's recovery progressed, the cycling world was reminded that, on solo descents, even the most meticulous preparation cannot eliminate the risks posed by unpredictable terrain and the relentless pursuit of speed. Paris-Roubaix, often called the Hell of the North, is defined by its brutal cobblestone sectors, none more notorious than the Trouet d'Arenberg. This 2.5-kilometer stretch of ancient pave slices through the Arenberg forest in northern France, and when rain falls, the stones become as slick as glass. Riders enter the sector at speeds close to 60 kilometers per hour, but within seconds, the surface shakes bikes and bodies with relentless intensity. Vertical vibrations on the cobbles have been measured at 10 to 15 times the force of gravity, with frequencies reaching 100 Hz. Hands go numb, vision blurs, and every muscle works to keep the bike moving in a straight line. Mechanical failure is never far away. In wet conditions, the coefficient of friction on the stones can drop by half, from 0.8 to 0.4, making tire grip unreliable. UCI incident data shows that rain increases crash probability on cobbled sectors by up to 40%. Punctures and wheel damage are common. In the 2023 edition, 15% of all race abandonments stemmed from mechanical failures caused by vibration. Tire pinch flats, where the rim slices the inner tube against the cobble edge, are a constant threat. Even the most advanced carbon wheels and tubeless tire setups can fail under the repeated pounding. Fatigue compounds every risk. The peloton fights for position before Arenberg, knowing that a crash or mechanical here can end a rider's chances for the day. The jarring impact travels through the frame, hands, and arms, forcing riders to loosen their grip and shift their weight. But even small mistakes can send a wheel skidding sideways. UCI data attributes 12% of peloton crashes in Paris-Roubaix to cobble-induced positioning errors, especially in wet years. Teams invest in equipment tailored for these sectors: wider tires, lower pressures, reinforced wheels, yet the unpredictable nature of the stones means no setup is foolproof. For sponsors and teams, the risks are accepted as the price of exposure on cycling's grandest stage. Paris-Roubaix delivers global visibility, but it also highlights the limits of technology and preparation. The hazards of Arenberg are not theoretical. They are measured in vibration metrics, puncture rates, and the visible toll on riders and equipment. Each year, the sector reminds the cycling world that survival here depends on more than strength. It requires luck, skill, and machinery that can withstand one of the most punishing surfaces in sport. Every Grand Tour brings its own signature hazards shaped by geography and weather. During Stage 8 of the 2021 Tour de France, the peloton faced a relentless alpine downpour on the descent to Le Grand Bornand. Rain hammered the roads, dropping surface friction and pooling water in the bends. Riders descended at over 70 kilometers per hour, their tires skimming across slick asphalt. 5 riders abandoned that day, including pre-race favorites, after a series of high-speed crashes on the wet descent. UCI incident reports linked the conditions to a 25% increase in crash risk, with impact forces on wet tarmac reaching up to 30 GG at these speeds. The heavy rain, combined with fatigue from earlier climbs, left little margin for error. Gravel sectors present a different kind of threat. The 2015 Giro d'Italia Stage 9 wound through the white gravel roads of Montalcino in Tuscany. Dry weather that day left the surface loose and dusty, reducing visibility and tire grip. Telemetry from onboard sensors recorded lateral slip angles up to 20 degrees and a stability coefficient as low as 0.3, less than half that of asphalt. Riders struggled to keep control, with power output dropping by 20% as they fought to correct slides. The stage saw a 17% dropout rate, the highest of that year's Giro, with mechanical failures and crashes concentrated on the gravel sections. UCI data attributes up to 12% of all Giro crashes to positioning mistakes and mechanicals on loose surfaces like these. Wind can be just as decisive as terrain. Stage 16 of the 2016 Vuelta a España crossed the open plains near Alcañiz, where crosswinds gusted up to 60 kilometers per hour. Peloton dynamics shifted in an instant as echelons formed, compressing riders into tight formations. The lateral wind generated yaw forces of up to 800 newtons on each rider, pushing bikes sideways and causing multiple pile-ups. Over 20% of the field abandoned or lost significant time that day. UCI records show that crosswind-induced crashes account for 12% of Vuelta incidents, with bunch compression and sudden gusts as key contributors. Each Grand Tour terrain, whether alpine rain, Tuscan gravel, or Aragonese wind, demands a different kind of vigilance. While teams invest in specialized equipment and strategy, the interplay of weather and topography continues to shape the risks that define professional cycling at its highest level. Speed in professional cycling is more than just a number on a screen. It is a physical force measured in energy and impact. When a rider hits 80 kilometers per hour in a sprint or on a descent, the energy at play is immense. The calculation for kinetic energy is straightforward: 1/2 times mass times velocity squared. For an 80-kilogram rider and bike traveling at 80 kilometers per hour, about 22.2 meters per second, the energy stored is roughly 19,700 joules. Increase that speed to 100 kilometers per hour, or 27.8 meters per second, and the energy jumps to over 30,900 joules. But energy alone does not tell the whole story. The real danger comes when that energy is released in a crash. The force a rider experiences depends on how quickly they stop, over what distance their body comes to rest. If a rider traveling at 50 kilometers per hour, or 13.9 meters per second, comes to a stop over just 30 centimeters, the average force can exceed 47,000 newtons. At 80 kilometers per hour, stopping over the same distance, the force skyrockets to around 117,000 newtons. That is more than double the force a helmet is designed to absorb in standard safety tests, which typically use a drop of just 2 meters and a force threshold of 250 to 300 G. These numbers are not just theoretical. In high-speed crashes, like those seen in Grand Tour sprints or mountain descents, the forces involved are enough to break bones, destroy barriers, and overwhelm even the best safety equipment. The difference between walking away and life-threatening injury often comes down to fractions of a second and centimeters of stopping distance. When a rider like Fabio Jakobsen or Remco Evenepoel collides with a barrier or road edge at race speed, the energy transferred to their body is measured in tens of thousands of joules. Even the most advanced helmets, meeting UCI and EN 1078 standards, are tested for impacts far below the real-world forces seen in these crashes. The helmet can absorb only a fraction of the energy generated in a 70 or 80 km/h impact. That is why survivability depends not just on equipment, but on every factor: course design, barrier placement, and the rider's ability to react in milliseconds. The physics of cycling crashes leave little room for error. In a sport where speeds keep rising and margins for safety are slim, the numbers behind every sprint and descent are a stark reminder of just how much is at stake. Head injuries have long been the most feared consequence of a cycling crash. In the early 2000s, the risks were clear, but the rules were inconsistent. That changed in 2003, when the UCI made helmets mandatory for all professional road races, following the death of Andrei Kivilev at Paris-Nice. Before this rule, helmet use was patchy, some teams insisted. Others left it to the rider, and many removed helmets for mountain finishes. The new regulations standardized safety, requiring helmets that met EN 1078 in Europe or CPSC in the United States. These standards set strict limits. In lab tests, helmets must keep peak linear acceleration below 250 to 300 g-forces during a controlled drop, and the head injury criterion, HYC, must stay under 1000, a threshold borrowed from automotive crash research. The numbers are stark. In a typical helmet test, a 5-kilogram head form is dropped from 2 meters onto a steel anvil. The helmet must absorb the impact so that the force transmitted to the head stays within survivable limits. But real-world crashes often exceed these scenarios. Riders like Fabio Jakobsen and Remco Evenepoel have survived impacts that far surpass standard test conditions, a fact that has driven ongoing innovation in helmet technology. One of the biggest advances is the focus on rotational forces. Traditional helmets protected mainly against straight-on impacts, but many cycling crashes involve twisting motions that can cause severe brain injuries, even without a direct blow. The multi-directional impact protection system, known as MIPS, introduced a low-friction liner that allows the helmet to slide relative to the head, reducing rotational acceleration by up to 40% in independent tests. By 2020, MIPS and similar systems had spread across the pro peloton, with major brands integrating the technology into models now certified for UCI competition. These changes reflect a broader shift in how the sport manages risk. The 2003 UCI helmet mandate was a direct response to quantified danger, and the adoption of rotational mitigation technology shows a willingness to adapt as new evidence emerges. Helmet standards continue to evolve, with updates to EN 1078 and CPSC protocols to account for both linear and rotational impacts. Dr. Richard Usher, Chief Medical Officer for Team Ineos, notes that while no helmet can guarantee survival in the most severe crashes, the combination of regulation and technology has reduced the rate of fatal head trauma in professional cycling by more than half over the past 2 decades. For teams, sponsors, and governing bodies, these standards are now a baseline, a minimum requirement for entering a sport where the risks remain ever present, but the tools for survival keep improving. Team budgets in professional cycling range from €20 million to over €50 million per year, with squads like Jumbo-Visma and Ineos Grenadiers operating at the top end. These financial resources shape everything from rider salaries and support staff to the quality of bikes and medical care available. Modern race bikes alone cost between $8,000 and $15,000 each, featuring carbon frames, electronic shifting, and custom aerodynamic components. At the World Tour level, a single crash can destroy tens of thousands of euros in equipment in seconds. But the pressure to deliver results often forces teams to make difficult choices. Sponsorship contracts are tied directly to race exposure and podium finishes. A major sponsor, expecting global television coverage and brand placement, may invest millions and also demand aggressive tactics, especially in high-profile sprints or mountain stages. For riders, the expectation is clear: take risks to win, even if it means pushing the limits of safety. Resource allocation becomes a tactical game. Teams decide how many mechanics and doctors to bring to each race, how much to invest in crash barriers or reconnaissance, and whether to prioritize lightweight bikes over more robust, crash-resistant setups. For a team with a €30 million budget, sending a full medical staff to every event is possible. For teams at the lower end, corners are sometimes cut, with fewer spare bikes, less advanced safety gear, or minimal on-site physiotherapy. These decisions filter down to the riders, who may face a crucial sprint or a dangerous descent with less support or older equipment. Jumbo-Visma has invested heavily in data analytics and risk management, using telemetry to monitor rider fatigue and equipment wear. Yet even with these measures, the unpredictable nature of racing means that budget alone cannot eliminate risk. The economics of the sport create a feedback loop. The more a team spends, the greater the expectation for results, which in turn can increase the willingness to accept danger. The financial stakes are not abstract. A single day's exposure in the Tour de France can deliver millions in media value for sponsors. But a crash that sidelines a star rider can cost a team its entire season's objectives. In this environment, the line between performance and survival is drawn not just by athletic ability or equipment, but by the constant negotiation between available resources and the risks teams are willing or forced to take. High-speed bunch sprint collisions top the list of cycling's most dangerous moments. Riders jostle at over 70 km/h, elbows locked, fighting for a line that barely exists. A single miscalculation, as seen in Katowice in 2020, can launch a rider into the barriers with devastating force, leaving shattered bikes and broken bodies in its wake. Mass pileups in the peloton unfold when 150 riders squeeze into roads built for far fewer. One clipped pedal or touch of wheels can trigger a domino effect, sending dozens sprawling. Near Saint-Flour in the 2011 Tour de France, nearly a quarter of the field crashed in seconds, with broken bones, torn ligaments, and seasons lost. Solo descent crashes haunt even the most skilled riders. Riders like Remco Evenepoel and Froome have plummeted off course at over 60 km/h. Wet roads, gravel, or a misjudged corner can send a rider over a barrier or into a ravine. Fractured pelvises and punctured lungs are common, and gravity and speed are merciless when control slips away. Cobbled sector wipeouts, especially in Paris-Roubaix, are infamous for their brutality. The jagged stones of the Trouet d'Arenberg numb hands and rattle bikes until grip fails. Rain turns the pave into a minefield. In 2023, 15% of Paris-Roubaix abandonments stemmed from crashes or mechanical failures on the cobbles. Gravel sector slides, common in Strade Bianche and the Giro d'Italia, bring their own hazards. Loose surfaces sap tire grip and obscure vision, forcing riders to wrestle for control. Collarbone and wrist fractures are frequent outcomes as wheels slip and bodies hit the ground. Crosswind-induced echelons split the peloton and spark sudden crashes. Gusts of 50 or 60 km/h shove riders sideways, compressing the group. Stage 16 of the 2016 Vuelta a España saw over 20% of the field lose time or abandon after multiple wind-driven pileups. Rain-soaked descents combine slick tarmac, poor visibility, and high speed. The 2021 Tour de France descent to Le Grand Bornand forced 5 riders to abandon in a single stage. with impact forces reaching up to 30 Gs. Wet weather raises crash risk by up to 25%, according to UCI data. Finish line pileups occur when exhausted riders sprint for minor placings, ignoring the narrowing road and looming barriers. Crashes sometimes erupt even after the finish line, as seen in multiple editions of the Tour and the Giro. Sudden mechanical failures, snapped chains, broken handlebars, and tyre blowouts can end a race in an instant. In 2022, a snapped carbon steerer sent a leading rider into a ditch at the Critérium du Dauphiné, ending his season. Vehicle collisions, though rare, are among the most severe. In the 2011 Tour de France, a team car sideswiped Juan Antonio Fletcher and Johnny Hoogerland, sending Hoogerland into a barbed wire fence at full speed. Professional cycling remains a sport where millimeters and milliseconds separate triumph from disaster. Today, the UCI reports over 1,200 race crashes annually across the World Tour. As speeds, sponsorships, and global visibility grow, so do the stakes for riders, teams, and fans. The ongoing tension between performance and survival drives relentless innovation, but also relentless risk. Every finish line crossed reminds us, safety is never finished. Share your thoughts on cycling's future below.